Isn't self-improvement, personal growth, personal development, all that stuff, isn't it kind of hokey? And what does it have to do with sailing? Well, in my opinion, nothing could be further from the truth. And we're going to get into it on this episode of What Could Go Right.
Welcome to the What Could Go Right podcast. We are your hosts, Erik, Orton.
And I'm Emily Orton.
And here we talk about personal growth and sailing. In 2014, we moved aboard a fixer-upper sailboat and bootstrapped a year sailing with our 5 kids, and it changed our lives forever.
We tell the whole story in our memoir, our book, 7 at Sea. On this podcast, we want to help you go from fear to freedom, one adventure at a time. I don't think that personal growth is hokey. I love it because I believe that as humans, growth is our default setting. Our friend Whitney Johnson says that all the time, and I love it. I just think we are not meant to stagnate. And saying that you want to grow or expand or refine doesn't mean you're not enough, you're not worthy, you're not lovable, you're not valuable, like worthy of respect and dignity just the way you are right now. I think it's just in our nature that we're curious. We want to be learning. We want to be growing. We get a sense of meaning from being able to progress, whether we're tracking how many people we've served or maybe like our son, how many pull-ups he can do. Like, we love to see that we're improving, that our impact is expanding, that we're learning something new and we're growing. So for me, I absolutely think that growth mindset is important. And in fact, if that's a new term to you, a lot of people talk about the way we think in terms of fixed mindset or growth mindset. Maybe you could shed light on the difference there.
Yeah, sure. And first of all, before we get into that, I'll just say that this is a little bit of us narrowing the topic of our podcast, because before we also included family connection and parenting adult kids, which we obviously still value and still do those things.
We might talk about it on
here. And we just might still talk about it.
Under this umbrella of growth.
Yeah, but I think we really wanted to focus in on personal growth because it's, I think it's at the heart of all of those things. We can grow personally as parents. We can grow personally, in our family connections, but the part that we have the most control over is ourselves. And so that's where we really want to start. I just want to preface by saying that.
I appreciate that. And I like that you're bringing the attention to the new intro. If
Ta-da!
You've been here for a while, you may have noticed in the last couple of weeks, we switched up our intro and we wanted to kind of explain why today and why these 2 main topics are important to us.
All right. So your question was fixed mindset versus
personal growth or growth mindset.
Growth mindset.
Fixed versus growth.
I want to go straight to stories because
how would you describe what it is, though?
Okay. Well,
if you're new to this language,
I think the fixed mindset, that's the person that says, I'm just not a skier. Mm-hmm. That's the fixed mindset. Is you may not ski, but a growth mindset will say, I'm not interested in learning to ski right now, or skiing isn't important to me. I have other things that are more important to me than skiing.
Or I could learn if I wanted to.
Yeah, like implying that you could learn if you wanted to, but you're just saying, I have priorities, but I can learn to ski. But to say, I am not a skier is self-defining in a limited way. Or I just don't have a lot of patience. Or, or I've got a quick fuse. Or I'm not good with people. Any of these statements that we can make about ourselves that hem us into our current state of being are symptoms of a fixed mindset, saying that's just not the way I am. And I have parts of my life in the past and present that I think are still fixed. And so I feel like this is very much an iterative process. It's layer by layer. I used to say sailing was for other people. I talk about that all the time. And obviously now I sail all the time, and I love helping bust this myth for other people. People will say, oh, I can't go sailing because I get seasick. Well, actually you can, but you're just choosing not to. And so, or, which is fine, but, or to say, anyway, anytime I say I'm not this or kind of describing myself in a way that is unmalleable, unchangeable, that's a fixed mindset. And then the growth mindset, of course, is saying, I can, or, I'm not a concert pianist yet, or, you know, if I wanted to, I could be, if I, you know, and then you just start to break down what's involved in getting there. But I think hopefully that covers, you know.
I think so. I remember there's this saying that is, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I always hated that saying because I just, from a very young age, I didn't believe it was true. It felt like an excuse. And I remember exactly where I was standing outside of this stone wall of Fort Tryon Park in New York City when I was listening to a podcast in the early 2000s, and they were talking about neuroplasticity, how the brain continues to change and adapt all the way through our entire life. There's not a time when your brain's like, okay, we're set now. And I loved that because it was, you know, we love to look for these like self um, validating facts, right? But this, I thought, okay, here is science saying that is not true. It's not true that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It's not true that we can't change. And now everywhere you look, they're like, this is going to change your brain. And like every single thing is putting in different signals, and you can have a lot of control over that. And when you have a growth mindset, you know you can control the narrative. I really appreciated you calling out these ideas of whenever you say to yourself, I am not this or I am that. And I've been catching myself in this a lot recently, recognizing that I have some stories on loop, like I'm not good at time management, or I have too many things going on, and I know that I could change that story and say, like, I have so many wonderful opportunities. And because of that, I need to really hone in on time management and be more defined in my boundaries so that I can get more work done and so that I can have more fun when it's playtime. So that's just an example in my personal life where I realize, oh, I'm doing that. I'm telling myself. And on the other hand, I also think it's really important to recognize that we can use that same language, recognizing we have the growth mindset and we have the power to choose when we use words to define ourselves in ways that we want to be or that we are. Like, I am kind. I would never do something like that because I respect every other person, every other human. And so you can like teach yourself through your words how you want to be.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning some ways that I have struggled with this and probably still do. One of which is, I have said many times, I never want to be the CEO of an organization because I just think, oh, that's like every day you wake up and there will be problems that you get to deal with, and people that are people
counting on you to solve their problems for them.
Yeah, just like the burden and the worry of like, oh, you know, everyone's jobs and incomes and this and that. And I find that I'm having to change my tune on that. But for a long time I've said I I'm not a CEO, or I don't want to be a CEO. And I feel like, and I guess saying I don't want to be is better than saying I'm not that type of person. Because anyway, I'm having to catch myself a lot as we're talking about this subject because it's something that I still struggle with.
I remember you used to say, I never want to be a homeowner.
Yeah.
That was a hard one. Like, we thought the invention of a home was a good thing, but we loved renting. We have a really good situation in New York City. We love renting. And over the years, we've come to see the value of being a homeowner. And since we decided it was a good thing for us, we did it. And now we are.
Now we're a couple years in, and so far we're still hanging in there.
That's true. So the other question was like, well, what does personal growth have to do with sailing? Like, how are we combining these two things in one podcast?
Okay. Questions for me?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Well, I was on a phone call. I think it was one of the crew Q&A calls recently, and I was talking to somebody about this. It might have been somebody that wanted to come on a buy the cabin trip. Actually, no, I think this was somebody that was wanting to put together a group and do a private trip. And we were talking about why doing any kind of getaway or retreat on a sailboat is so powerful. And it's because when you change your environment radically, you open up to all kinds of stuff that you never would have considered before. And I think there's two aspects to it. One is that you sort of take a break from all of your normal, regular situations that obviously, that in many ways imply responsibility. So for example, I know all about the staycation and this and that, but it's really hard to break with your everyday rhythms and patterns when you're in the same location.
Mm-hmm.
And those rhythms and patterns are going to reinforce just the flow of your day, your emotional. We have physical and emotional habits about, this is just how I emotionally respond to these sorts of things. And all those things are very supported by our current environment. But when we go into a new environment, first of all, it's like being a baby. A baby is just awake to the world and aware of everything, every sound, every smell, every, interaction is just amplified in a huge way. And I come across this a lot when we're on the boat and people are like, what was that sound last night? It's like, what sound? Because I've now tuned out to it.
I want to interrupt you there
Yeah, go ahead.
real quick for a second. Hold on to your thought. But this reminds me that one of our favorite travel hacks for people is whether you're coming on a sailing trip with us or you're traveling somewhere else, go out and take pictures the first day. Everything that attracts your attention that stood out to you, because by day 5, you're not really going to be noticing it anymore. And then you'll miss it because you didn't grab it the first day when you recognize, wow, this is different from my normal.
That's really true. Because when we did a 3-month van trip across Europe, and we had this nice camera to kind of document this trip. And I remember in Italy, especially, I would get up and I would bring the nice camera on day 1, because it was a little bit of a pain, to be honest, because it's heavier and bulky, and it's not really what I want to be lugging around on my morning walk. But
on day one,
it's totally worth it. And snap, snap, snap. And it's true. Even by day 2 and 3 in the same place, I'm used to that cool door design, or I'm used to, this view, or these kinds of trees. I haven't seen these kinds of trees before.
Or this market.
Yeah. All that stuff starts to become normal. And so, being aware of what's happening on those first interactions is a great way to just get the most out of your experience. And so, going back to this, is it okay if I go back to this idea of sailing and how it connects with personal growth? Is because for most people, living on a sailboat, even just for a few days or a week, is a big transformation, and you very much disconnect with what's familiar, with what's comfortable. Don't get me wrong; the boats are still comfortable, and you have a lot of the things that make life nice, but it's just the whole floor is moving under your feet, literally. And you go to bed and the boat is facing one direction, and you wake up and the boat is facing another direction if you're at anchor or on a mooring boat.
Stars.
And you can see the stars, and just how you use the toilet is different. It still works. It's just different, but most of us don't pay attention to.
It's like 80% the same.
How do you flush the toilet? We're pretty much like, oh, this I don't usually have to think about this, but on a boat you do, at least the first time or two. And how do you turn on the stove, or how do I close the door? And where, there's stuff that's stored in the floor. Okay, let me get used to that. So just these little things that can really awaken us to a very nascent, childlike view of the world really lends itself to self-discovery and creating new and better habits, because being in a new environment and learning a new skill is so powerful. And one of the cool things about it is that what I love is that it also slows time way down. So when we're growing and we're experiencing new things, time expands. Just like when you're a child, summer vacation, or summer went on forever, because we're still learning and absorbing so many things. Anyway, I don't mean to digress, but those are a few thoughts.
I love that. Thank you for those thoughts. For me, it's true, everything that you said about how just getting in a new environment, and particularly living on the water like that, even just for a few days. The first time that we spent just a few days, I think maybe 5, a handful of days on a sailboat was completely transformative for me. And I began to see myself in a new way. So much of the energy that I had spent thinking about our house or our kids or all that stuff, it was freed up to focus on these new things and gave me the bandwidth to grow. And that is where I overcame my fear of deep water. And imagine how transformative that is, and gave me a whole new perspective on fear in general. And I started realizing, oh, so maybe these fears are a little trigger for me to explore deeper, that something good is waiting. So I love that. Also, what sailing has to do with personal growth for us is when we in 2014 bootstrapped that year on a sailboat with our 5 kids, that was one of the most dramatic, physically obvious experiences that we had, where we had to see ourselves in a new way. We had to learn new skill sets. We changed locations. We changed, like, the only thing that was really the same was our family and our faith. And everything else was different. And we made new friends. We learned new skills. We made new memories, new stories, new confidence, most of all. So as we did that, we then wrote this book about it, Seven at Sea, where we kind of chronicle our emotional and physical journey. And as we wrote that, we reverse engineered this framework. So for growth and for accomplishing new goals and for dealing with uncertainty. And so sailing, every part of sailing has now become for us a metaphor and a template for personal growth that's transferable and repeatable in all of the other areas of our life, whether it's trying to learn a new skill, improve a relationship, or see yourself in a new way so that more of the world is open to you. So that's why, for me, why we talk about personal growth and sailing together. And because we take people sailing now, like, it's become a huge part of our lives and who we are. We've now been doing this for 10 years. And
yeah. And I'll say this, whether, if you're listening to this and whether you want to come sailing with us or not, whether you do come sailing with us or not, is not the point. Obviously, we'd love to meet you, love to get out on the water together. But I think the hack can be that if you will find a way to get yourself into a new physical situation, something that is, I'm going to say uncomfortable, and it doesn't mean it needs to be unsafe necessarily, but putting yourself into a new situation, just be observant and be aware of how open you are to change and growth in those situations. It could be camping, it could be a road trip, it could be, moving houses. I mean, man, when you move, all of a sudden you open yourself up to big things. Just rearranging the furniture can shift something inside you. And so I think the power of our environment on what happens inside our hearts and minds is, I think, the real takeaway. And we just had the most powerful experience personally through sailing. And when we take people sailing, we see the most powerful transformation in that environment.
Yeah, that was really a seminal experience for us. And because it was so intense, and we went from new island to new island, repeat, like that, we were always moving. It allowed us to really see this template, this pattern that we then started using again and again in other areas. And we actually used it to write our book, and we used it to travel in different places and do things that we previously thought were closed off to us. So, we've talked about those things on other episodes, but we wanted to just sort of address the change in and refinement in the focus of this. We would love for you to see yourself as an explorer, as an adventurer,
as a navigator,
and be curious, discover what's possible for you, redefine adventure maybe as something where you don't know how it's going to turn out. Let's call that an adventure, and let's bring that explorer mindset and curiosity to it, and move from fear to freedom.
One adventure at a time.
One adventure at a time.
Love it.
So that is why we talk about personal growth and sailing on this, and we hope that you will have an adventure today.
What could go right? Hey there, this is Erik. Just want to let you know what the latest is on sailing. First of all, people are having a blast on these trips, and we're actually kind of overwhelmed with the response. But we're having fun, so we're going to keep going. All right, so we do have some limited space for trips this fall and winter. All of our summer trips are full up, but in fall, winter 2024, we have room on a trip to Italy in September, Mexico in October, Thailand in November, and Bahamas in December. So there are limited spaces for those trips coming up. However, we also are booking into 2025. So in the winter months, we're going to be going to warm places like the Bahamas and the Caribbean. And then once we get more into summer, we're going to be in Europe. So Croatia, Greece, Italy, and hopefully we're going to do a week in Mallorca, Spain. So that's the lineup. And if you're interested in any of that, go to theawesomefactory.nyc/sailing 2024. This will also be in the show notes. You can also email us at hello@theawesomefactory.nyc. So go to the show notes. The link is theawesomefactory.nyc/sailing 2024, even though we're talking about trips into the future in 2025. You can also email us at hello@theawesomefactory.nyc. Would love to welcome you aboard.